welcome back to Network Africa. Well, staying in East Africa, we've got news from Rwanda as regards how the country is using something possibly lethal to produce something of immense benefit. Now, they are turning into a lifeline by generating electricity to help businesses expand and light up a nation with a chronic power shortage. This is a positive development for the country as it comes at a time when governments across the continent are struggling to increase power capacity and expand grids to meet the demands of growing populations with rising aspirations.
Rwanda is set to increase its electricity output through the recently launched Kivuwatt, which uses methane gas from Lake Kivu. Kivuwatt, which started operations in May, is part of a network of projects aimed at providing 70% of the 11 million population with power from the grid or off-grid by 2018, up from 25% now. Much will come from renewable sources. Lake Kivu's methane has been added to the list of its emerging resources formed from biogas created by decomposing matter on the bed of the lake but is trapped by a layer of mineral-rich water flowing off nearby volcanic soil. Based on studies, officials say that unless the methane is reduced in a controlled manner via extraction or being used to generate power, it risks building up to a level that will lead to the release of toxic gases and possibly an explosion.
The gas extraction facility is very unique because there's no other lake in the world with this kind of methane in the lake, so it's never been in industrial scale. But also the power plant, which is basically very basic, ordinary Wärtsilä power plant, but now instead of natural gas, we are using methane gas.
Gamaru's company plans to extract the methane to power a 26 megawatt plant, with plans to increase that to 100 megawatt by 2020, at a cost of about 500 million to 600 million US dollars. Despite that hefty investment, using domestic resources is a boom for a nation that has to truck all imports into the country about 1,400 kilometers through Kenya or Tanzania, often along traffic-clogged roads that are poorly maintained. As it adds more supply, state-run Rwanda Energy Group is in talks with the regulator on lowering tariffs to help the poor and support industry.
We are discussing with the regulator on how the tariff can be reviewed, and it is clear that the tariff will be reviewed downwards, especially for industries. It is a must if we want to increase exports, or if we have to invest in local made products. We have to invest in industries, we have to attract investors. So to be competitive in the region, we have to review downwards the tariffs.
Rwanda's installed power capacity is now 190 megawatts and set to rise by the end of July to 205 megawatts. Once a new peat burning plant being tested is linked up, the aim is 583 megawatts by 2018, a goal Mugiraneza admits Rwanda would have to work hard to achieve.
Now, just like we told you earlier on, the Israeli Prime Minister, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, is in Kenya at the moment. But before he arrived in the East African country, he was in Uganda a day earlier, specifically yesterday. Now, joining us from Kampala, Uganda, to fill us in on how that visit went is renowned Ugandan journalist Joshua Poro. Joshua, thank you for coming on the program.
Pleasure is all mine.
A lot of eyes were on Uganda yesterday due to the presence of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Could you fill us in on how that played out in terms of what Uganda stands to gain? Joshua,
about 40 years ago, commanders from Israel went now about Israel raided Entebbe International Airport to rescue about 248 prisoners who had been taken by Palestine terrorists aboard a a French flight from Tel Aviv to France, and was diverted to Entebbe International Airport. And in that raid, over 100 Jews were rescued by these Israeli commandos. So the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, was here to commemorate that day, 40 years exactly yesterday. Now, the significance of this matter is, one, the leader of the commandos was actually the brother to Benjamin Netanyahu. He's the one who was leading this raid, and unfortunately, he was the only Israeli soldier who died during this raid. So one, he was here to commemorate his brother, but also secondly, he is here and he's having actually an African tour to try and improve on the relationship between Africa and Israel, and it has actually been quite tense for the last 3 decades.
What does Israel stand to gain from this particular trip?
Well, if you do recall some years back, due to the hostility between Israel and its neighbors, and of course matters were not made better when Israel was supporting the apartheid government in South Africa, a bunch of African countries led by Egypt decided to stage a campaign against friendship or ties with Israel, of course, which many African countries accepted to go by. So, I mean, Israel had lost friends in Africa, but now with this visit, 30 years, for example, in Uganda, we've not had any Israeli prime minister in the last 30 years coming to visit. So, I mean, they stand to make more ties within Africa, since the whole world is looking at Africa as a golden cow. It's where they're minting all sorts of, milk and money from. If you recall, there were summits organized by China for Africa, the US-Africa Leaders Summit, and then Germany. Everyone is having something to do with Africa. So I think Israel is basically looking at repairing its ties with Africa. If you also recall, President Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya just promised that he will stand to front Israel as an observer of the African Union. So, I mean, friendship is good enough for business. And if you realize, Israel is quite strong in the agricultural sector and in their military sector. So they are looking at signing a $13 billion deal to look at how to improve agriculture and security within Africa. So basically, I'm looking at economic and political ties for Israel.
Well, has there been any response or reaction from either the Ugandan authorities or the people of Uganda about Israel's place as an African Union observer being restored?
Well, currently there has not been any serious reactions, but as you can see, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was just here, and the Ugandan government has represented a good relationship with the Israeli people, and President Museveni actually offered to be a mediator between Israel and Palestine. So I think even if there is no response at this particular point in time, very, very, very soon, I think there will be a response in time, but I think Uganda will particularly be in support. And if you must realize that we had presidents of the East African bloc, of course, President Museveni, Uhuru Kenyatta, Paul Kagame, the Zambian president, and then we had the Ethiopian Prime Minister, Haile Mariam Desalegn, the Tanzanian foreign minister. All these people had meetings with Benjamin Netanyahu, and I think they've come to a point of agreement. So if you have members of the East African bloc supporting him...
Thank you very much, Joshua Poro, for your time. We just have to let you go at the moment. Thank you for talking to us on the program. Well, still to come on Network Africa, Kenya breaks the taboo of sex education amongst children with tech alternatives. Please stay with us.